from a standpoint of like, it's not just education, but it's why. What am I after? What am I looking for? What are the tools and resources I need in order to get to my point? From a standpoint of like, it's not just education, but it's why. What am I after? What am I looking for? What are the tools and resources I need in order to get to my point?
All right, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And you are in for a treat today. We have Stephen Cartwright on today. When we think about success, or when I think about success, I think about, people in my life who have made an influence that are making an influence in lots of lives. And so, Stephen and I have known each other for a while. I met him when he was a banker. I know that he was a youth pastor at a prominent church here in the city that I live in. And now he's doing some community banking. He has an amazing family. He has an amazing wife and kids. And, sometimes when we think about success, we think about the amount of money somebody makes, or we think about the famousness that they have because they were an athlete, or because they're an influence on, YouTube or Twitter, or, Snapchat for the younger kids, and Instagram. But when I think of somebody who is moving forward, who is taking a community and making a community a better place, who is taking the principles that God has given us, the abilities that God has given us, and doing something with it. And so excited to talk to Stephen today about all the wonderful things that he's doing. But I think we're going to be able to get into some pretty deep conversations about how you, as you're watching this, can move forward in your own life, how you can take an example of what Stephen has done with his life and apply it to your life, how you can take some of the principles that we talk about, whether it's finance, whether it's trust, whether it's, health, or those types of things, and really be able to apply them. And so, Stephen, thank you for being on today. Thank you for taking your time. I know we spent some time, just trying to coordinate. You're a busy man, because I know you're in the community. I know you're doing some amazing things, and I can't wait to hear about them. So maybe you can just kind of start with your story, where you grew up, the types of things that your family was like, your household was like, and then somehow make us end up where we're at today, and then we'll just move it forward from there. So go ahead and just kind of share with us where you got started.
Yeah. Well, amazing. And first of all, I want to say thank you. I'm honored to be able to be on the podcast, to join you, one who is moving and shaking in your own right. I think the last time we met, you had just became officially the Dr. Brian E. Arnold. And so that's huge. That's huge by itself. And so totally appreciate the relationship, appreciate being able to be on and just to share a little bit of my story. If it can help someone, I'm just honored and humbled to just do it. I'm Stephen Cartwright, born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. Ninth child of 15 kids.
What? 15?
Child of
wow.
15
Okay.
Kids. And I hate to say it like this, but I have to say it these days, like same mom, same dad, just old school though, just really old school. My mom was the oldest of 17 kids. So it's kind of like it was in the blood, I guess, at that point. Yeah. So ninth child of 15 kids, Southern born and bred, came in Denver now, moved to Denver by way of Texas. My wife is from Mississippi, right? And so even a lot of the conversation of like potentially what we'll get into today, a lot of my background and influence, just being Southern alone and what it means to be Black and Southern is a thing, because a lot of that was the hotbed for, what has been major experiences in our history in America, at least, for like what the Black culture is and what the community is, right, and where we are, and like where how that's still even affecting us from generation to generation. And so, but I will say I feel significantly blessed. Grew up in the church as well, and so when I look at wherever I am or whatever I've become, I have to say it is all because of God and His position and His place in my life. Getting to know Him at a very young age, and not just being churchy, but actually having a relationship with Him has just had a really impact. And I that's why I live like I can't complain at all. Been on the journey, right? Understand the journey to freedom, which probably the biggest part about it is the journey. So maybe we'll get into some of those details. But yeah, we've been in Denver since 2009. Came here. I was in banking for 5 years in Texas at Comerica Bank, and then took on a full-time position as a youth pastor in Denver. So I was out of corporate America for at minimum for about 7 years as we were transitioning. And 2016, we transitioned out of the youth pastor role, resigned my position. Me and my wife started our own ministry here, a local ministry in Denver. And then at the end of 2017, I needed to go back to work. Actually, end of 2016, I needed to go back to work so I can pay some bills and take care of my family.
There we go. There we go. I love it.
Had a church member that told me about Key Bank. I was honestly more kind of in a desperate position. And I was like, I'll just come on as an on-call teller. It doesn't matter. Just let me get my foot in the door. So came on looking for even just, I was okay with like a part-time job just to get my foot in. Did an interview. By the grace of God, went in for a part-time role, came out with a full-time role as a teller. And then it has just been amazing from then, went from tellering to being a banker to being a branch manager to now I'm an area retail leader, which is Key Bank's fancy way of saying I'm a district manager, cover about 12 branches in our, what we call our Colorado East area. And it's just an amazing, very diverse group, very diverse community. I'm able to connect the work that we did in the ministry with the work I'm doing in the financial banking industry. And it's just really been great to get out in the community and try to make a difference in this way and still serve and still be able to help and provide solutions every day for my team and for the people that we serve in the communities that we really want to have impact in.
Oh my gosh. Hey, what a great resume of things that you could do to be able to serve the community. One of the things that you mentioned, 9 of 15 kids. And you also mentioned that you grew up in the South. And I recently visited Alabama, and a totally different culture. I'm here from Colorado and lived in California for 25 years and had never even been to the South like I was. When you're thinking about identity or thinking about what shaped your identity, I mean, I know you had your parents that were there, and what was it like to be in the community as all the things that are happening with, what it means to be Black in America, and from a Southern perspective, and then being able to I guess compare that to now you've been in Colorado for several years, and how's that any difference than where you've been?
Yeah. What's funny about it is that I didn't really realize how different it was until I got to Colorado.
Yeah.
Moving from Tennessee and then living in Mississippi for a couple of years, or about a year and a half or so, and then being in Texas. When I got to Texas is big, right? It is huge. A lot of people there. And so in my mind, I thought by virtue of its huge population, that meant diversity, which in a sense it does. But we also saw that diversity doesn't always mean interaction and engagement with people outside of that group that looks like you. And so even in Texas, like as big as it was, there was still kind of like these segmented pieces, not as much as Mississippi, definitely not as much as Tennessee, but there was still segmentation. So when I got to Colorado and working with young people, I mean, I would give you this, and I hope it doesn't sound bad, but I remember I was dealing with the kids, and like I saw a ton of like mixed kids. I saw kids that were Asian in my youth group. I saw definitely kids that were Black, saw kids that were white. But the one that got me is I saw kids that were Native American.
Yes.
And my mind, I honestly, and again, I don't want to offend anybody, I just kind of put them in a space of just being Hispanic. And I didn't realize like they kind of looked the same, but no, this is Native American, not even just to call them Indian, but Native American. And initially when I looked at it, my sheltered Southern mindset would kind of look at it in a sense of like, man, this is different. I'm not used to this. I'm not familiar with it, and almost kind of like there's something wrong with this. I don't know I don't know this type of child, But then I had to look at it, and the Lord actually had to deal with me about it, where it says like, no, it's actually not them, it's you, because you're the one who have like a closed mindset and never been exposed to this level of diversity. And so once he did that and showed me like it's not just, oh, I'm around a bunch of people, I'm actually engaging in just like a very diverse environment. And then to bring that even into the church environment is a thing by itself, because there's segmentation there too. And so having to go through a process where I had to like kind of see myself and realize it's me, because coming from a Southern background, there's just a lot of, I won't say segregation, I'll just say segmentation. And there's a lot of breaking off where you're just not dealing with people outside of those who look like you. And if you are dealing with them, it's a thing. If that thing of, if you got a white friend or you got to know somebody, that's a thing, right? From coming from where we come from, because it just didn't happen. And so I had to go through it. And this is me, going on 30, and at that point in my life, having to have like my own process of transitioning around how I think differently about people, because I just wasn't exposed in that way. Open to it, but never had a chance to actually have touch points and connections with people that were, wildly different from the way I grew up and the people I was familiar with seeing.
Gotcha. So now, I mean, I'm assuming since with 19 kids, they all didn't move to Colorado. There's still some that are in the South, and so I'm sure you go home to visit. What are the dynamics like? I know you deal with youth, and so you think about identity and the identity of the, the Black man or the Black male, or in those two different sexes. What are some things that you notice that may be able to help folks?
So I caught the last thing you said. They were not in the South. So some are still, definitely they're not all here. Totally, like I'm the only part of my family that's here right now. Gotcha.
So how do you? And we can fix the video in here as we need to get when my producer puts it together. So when you think of you going back home and you're looking at the diversity that's back home and where it's at now, and you think about identity, what are some things that you notice about identity and how that we can move forward as Black men to increase our identity, both in Colorado and in the South? And I assume it's a little bit different, but maybe some just common threads that we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, I feel like exposure makes a difference.
Okay.
How you are exposed, and I won't even just say not from a well perspective, meaning I don't necessarily have to be exposed to very rich people in order to become wealthy, right? I probably just need to be exposed to some teaching that talks about it, right? Okay. And so one of the things I think makes a difference is exposure, and then also though really digging into how our upbringing impacts our identity. And the conversation of identity for the Black man centering itself in many cases in dignity. And so, when we look at identity for us, we have to look at identity and have the conversation within the confines of dignity and value and worth. Because when we look at our identity and we look at how we are, a lot of what was historically kind of beat into us, or maybe even beat out of us, was the value and the worth that we had. And so a lot of the movement that we're doing right now is just getting us to a place of like a better sense of ourselves. Like I'm okay being me, I'm okay in the skin that I am. We talked before about this, like the hair I wear, even as a district manager, and how I wear my hair is a thing I have to think about as a Black man. right? Because those were like labels and stigmas that were placed on us that we had to be a certain way, and then we were trying to operate at a clip that was comparative to a person that would never know and would never have to experience the things that we experience, right? I can't change the color of my skin. I can't change the way my hair is, right? I am who I am, and I have to be okay with that, right? And so getting to a place of that is me being able to appreciate me and my value. Nina Simone said just my blackness, and being able to appreciate my blackness. And I loved when she said that and she made that comment because it's beautiful. And not to say that nobody else is beautiful, but I have to say as a Black man that I'm beautiful, that I am valuable, that I am worth it. And I have to be intentional about it because those are the things that I came up against when it came to my identity, right? Those are the things that impacted me when I was growing up. Those are the things that even some things that I didn't live in the 60s, but there's something in the blood, almost like in our genealogy, that because it's a part of our history, I feel it. I relate to it. I can sense it, you going to Alabama and seeing, and Alabama is just a thing by itself. But just being able to have that experience, you feel it in a different way because it's so associated with you and your people and where we come from. And so for me, that conversation around identity is probably one of the most important conversations we have to have because money, a lot of money in the hands of a broken identity is a recipe for disaster. I can have things, I can even get degrees, I can find successfulness from a materialistic standpoint. But if I haven't come to a peaceful resolve about myself, no matter what I have, my character will squander it. And so I need to be able to have a solid, like a stability about who I am. And that does begin with my identity and understanding my worth. And so the scripture would say I would have to be able to understand that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, right? Like I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Let's start there. I worked with the CU Boulder football team. And one thing I would tell them last year as I was doing some sessions with them, I told them, I said, the one thing you have to understand is that the dignity of your identity is found in his divinity. So I start there and I say, we are made in the image and likeness of God, all of us. So we all get that value from it, not coming from, even just my background or my family, what I have, what I don't have. It comes from who my maker is. And my maker made me in his image and in his likeness. That's my dignity. That's my value. And that's the worth of my identity. And when I get that worth, when I get that value, then I can, from that centered place of who I am, then I can now go attack these other areas that are critical now to the other aspects of my upbringing, my makeup, my molding, my shaping of who I become as a man, which is the last thing I'll say on that is like looking at the history of Dr. King and the marches that they did. The thing that always like sat with me and resonated with me was the signs that they would hold up that says, I am a man. Right? Not just equal pay, not like pay me better, not treat me better, but just acknowledge that I am a man. And when I can acknowledge that I am a man, fearfully wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God, then I can go forward in the purpose now and living out in the community and the lifestyle that he wants me to have based on the value and worth of who I am, my dignity and my identity.
Wow, that's so powerful. I love the whole process of saying, I love who I am. I love me. I'm a wonderful person. You've been developing kids and developing people, and there's so many, even in our own culture, where we say things and words are so powerful, that, you said your upbringing and your family and, the things that they told you who you are. Not everybody gets that. So let's say it's later in life now and you become a man and you're kind of broken or the trauma or whatever that went through. What are some things that folks can do or men can do that can help shape that to become to that belief that says, I'm beautifully and wonderfully made? Because like you said, that money that comes along with it, if you're broken, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So we got to build that up first. So how do we do some of that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of little things that can become the one big thing. Starting with community, right? We always talk about who are your associations, who are the voices that are speaking to you, because it's funny how much before we get into an action, a word can change a person's life. The right words, hearing the right things. And so you have to sometimes look at your surroundings, look at your relationships, and then ask yourself, what conversations are these surroundings, are these relationships having with me, right? That impact me and help dictate the type of person I'm becoming. Exposing myself again to conversations that allow me first to hear things like this, right? That this is who I am as a man, this is how I am, and then here's the thing though, but then also being in a place where I can then hear these words and put them up against the experience I've had that may have made me broken, that may have made me a certain type of way. Because the other side of it is then the and the hardest part of it is not just hearing the words, but taking them and using them as an ingredients to make me better. Because when I do that, if you think about what it's like when you're like mixing and making a cake, or you're mixing and doing something, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of labor, right? I think about seeing my mom in the kitchen, seeing my wife in the kitchen, and me trying to be in the kitchen with them, and the labor is like, you got to dig, you got to do all this work, you got to do all these different things. And you think about what that experience is like, and then look at how then when I'm trying to address trauma, we mentioned about trauma in one of the questions, trauma and brokenness. When I have to address those things, it's the hardest thing to do, but it's the most important thing to do. Being able to look me in the eye, look me in the face of who I am right now compared to who I want to be, and then begin to ask myself, what is it going to take for me to get past where I am to where I want to be? And it's hard. It's hard. It's work. And you have to be committed. After you get the words, you have to be committed to the work of taking those words and then making them your reality. And when you talk about brokenness, sometimes we don't know how broken we are and the depth of it. And we don't know then, because we don't know the depth. First of all, we don't know how much time it's going to take. We don't know how many tears we're going to have to cry. Like, it's almost kind of like I cried tears because I was broken, and you're going to cry some tears trying to get unbroken too. Trying to God putting you back together and getting healed again. It's hard work, because there's things you got to confront in yourself, things you have to confront in your relationships, things you have to confront in your environment. There's things you have to confront in your relationship with God. Like, there's so many different elements and factors that go into it, and you have to use the work. You have to get committed to the work of saying, I'm going to do something different with my life. Now, I'll give you one more with the word. There's the work. And then the other part is there's vision.
Okay.
What you have to do is you have to start seeing yourself differently. You have to start seeing kind of your situation for what it is. And then you have to start seeing yourself for your potential, who you can be and what you can do. Because now all of that has to do with a mindset, honestly. Okay. It has to do with a mindset. It has to do with how you think and see yourself, imaginations that have to be sometimes cast down, or thoughts that have to be sometimes embedded, where we begin to see ourselves in a different light. And so one of the things about the Black man is that we have to kind of own certain things, see certain things about our situation that we have to own, right? We have to own, like, what, just, again, several different things to get us to the same thing, but I'll just throw out some. Like, we have to own our history in America. Right. We have to see what that has done to us. We have to see how that has impacted our financial situations, like from a generational perspective. Whereas we it's important for us to say we're first generation versus I may be sitting with people. I may be working with a kid that's 20 years old and he's third generation banker. You know what I mean? And I may be first generation banker, and I'm older than him and live longer than him, right? And so the generational gap is important, but that's a part of us being able to see this is the situation that we're in. This is what our history here has put us in. We have to see history of policing, how that's affected us, like different things like that has impacted the way we have been taught, impacted the way we have now lived in our world, impacted the way we have the things, how we then have been expected, the expectations we have set for our own lives. In Mississippi, I remember when I got there and seeing people like the expectation, whereas we talk a lot, you're in real estate, so we talk a lot about like, I want you to purchase your first home. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. But when I got to Mississippi, it was, I just want a double wide trailer. Wow. I want the trailer, right? And then a fancy car with that trailer, right? Of course, yeah. So you have this differences because expectations are different, right? Opportunities are different. What type of job, being there and still having people that are grown that make $12 an hour, versus here you can make anywhere $18, $20, $21 an hour at the same type of job, right? Mm-hmm. Just different situations. So we have to see our situation for what it is. And then we have to start asking ourselves, what's the fix? What's the solution? How can I be a part of the solution and not continue to be a part of the problem? How can I see myself in a different way, going through a process that puts me on a journey to freedom that will get me there, and being okay with what that time looks like. And so if it means I have to start here and have a plan for the next 20 years, this is where I want to be, there's a lot we can get done in 20 years. There's a lot Dr. King got done in 10 years between 1955 to 65. There's a lot that was done in those 10 years. And so there's a lot that we can do in 10, 15, 20 years if we set ourselves up for it. But then it may not take that long once we put our hands to the plow and really just go to work. And so long story short, those are some of the things that I feel like we can do and we have to do. Cannot stress the importance of like having education. If we don't have education, having trade skills, expertise, finding ways to learn and get ourselves to be better. What banking allowed me to do was it gave me an expertise that I could bring to the marketplace, that I could bring to my community, right? And I don't have to be like everybody else. I just got to find my thing that I can use to contribute. And so being a banker has always been my thing since I met you, right? It's always been, I just want to be a banker and I want to help people and I want to make a difference. I have access to resources that other people don't have access to. I'm going to use this to make a difference in my community. And I've seen that not just make a difference in my community, but it's made a difference in my own life.
Wow. Okay. So good. Maybe I should just recap some of what I got. For one, you think about words, and words being so important. And I wrote down, you can talk and do things without thinking, but try to think without words.
Yeah.
You're right. Like what you get when you try to think without words, you don't get anything because the words are so valuable and important. And so I think of like affirmations, our affirmations, the good words that we put in, or what words are we putting into our minds? And I think you kind of talked really good about that. And then you brought up vision. And then when I think about vision, you said seeing where you can be. Does that take, when we think about vision, seeing other people who look like you doing things that you may want to do? Is that important to us to be able to do, or is it just God's just already given us the vision and we can see it already? Or does it use people?
I think it's both. I think it's both because there is a thing, right, where we have affinity groups, right? Interesting enough, my father, and I didn't try for it to be like, but I'm just going to use this as an example. My father was an elder in the church. Mm-hmm. I became an elder in the church. When I became an elder in the church, my father was an influence of that. Like when I thought about how to do this, I looked at him because I saw him do it. Yes. So seeing him, not to reduplicate what he did, but to show me what's possible, right? So I was able to look at my father, who raised 15 kids, right? Who struggled and was on the journey to freedom and has been, and to be a great man for 9 boys and 6 girls, right? And be influenced. So yes, being able to see him, who was close to me, I look like him, right? And so I won't say he looks like me. I'm gonna say I look like him, because then I'll get in trouble. But I look like him, and so it is important for me to see others, right? And I know it's important because sometimes, even without thinking about it, I'll say, even for my role at KeyBank, every time I see a Black person in leadership, I say, wow, they're Black. Gotcha. That thought goes through my mind. So I know it has impact, especially like, I shouldn't say especially, but like if I see a black female, a Black woman in leadership, if I see a Black man in leadership, every time I see my people, I say, wow, that's awesome, because they're Black. And it's important for us to see us at the table. I think one of the things Dr. King even left what he was saying a lot in his, especially even in the latter years of his life, is like, one of these next steps is we have to get ourselves a seat at the table. We have to be present. If change is really going to come, we have to get in the places where change can happen, right? And so us having a seat at the table and us being able to see ourselves, it is powerful, because it shows us what's possible. And we need to see that, because again, when we look at our history in America has always been to put us down and in lower positions and tell us what's not possible for us. So we need to be the ones in position, showing us that this is what is possible for us when we do things the right way and we commit ourselves to that level of excellent living.
Wow. And man, just you saying that, put that in my mind, in my head, is when you said, every time I see a Black man who's succeeding, every time I see a Black man who's speaking, I think of, he's a Black man. I actually do that every single time too. And then we say, well, it doesn't matter. But heck yeah, it does matter, because we're thinking that every single time. One of the other things you brought up was education, and how important education is, whatever that education is. One of the things that I struggle with is you talked about expectation too. What is the expectation of education as Black men when we start getting educated? Because I think that might steer us, because, someone might say, well, education isn't right, or education isn't helping me, or education didn't put me there. But I don't know if our expectation going in is that we're going to all be what do you think that is? And how do we work with it?
Yeah. So my thing would be, education would have to depend on what your end game is. So when we talk about education, a lot of the influence of education really depends on how we were as we were being educated in school. Right. So a lot of times the thought is like, you went to high school, the next step is go get your education, get your college degree. Right. And it's just that. It's like a blanket statement sometimes. And whereas like we're in our day and time, and I won't say just now, but we're at this space where we're trying to think more holistically from a standpoint of like, it's not just education, but it's why. What am I after? What am I looking for? And then what are the tools and resources I need in order to get to my point, like my desired destination, right? So I think with education, it begins with the why. What am I looking for? And as a Black man, again, we have historically why HBCUs are really big is because we had to create our own means of being educated and being informed. Organizations like Denver Area, NARAB, and NAACP, where we had to find ways to fight for resources and possibilities, and we had to create these affinity groups to make these things happen for ourselves. But we've also learned, and this is the thing I would talk about when it came to education, especially with young people, is that education can happen on many different levels. There's so many different ways that you can get your education, and meaning educate yourself in the field and the desired path that you want to be on, right? I'll add one more thing about that, but there's so many different ways to be educated. So I saw kids, and the reason why I had to think about that is because I saw kids who wanted to go to these very big schools and that their parents sometimes could not afford.
Mhm.
They wanted the experience. They wanted it this way or that way. And it was kind of like a tunnel vision when it came to, well, this is the way I want to do it. But like the capacity to really do that was not there. But there were capacities. If you stay in state, you could be educated for free. And we have some great colleges and universities in Colorado alone. And you could do that be at those really great institutions at a much cheaper price tag than, going outside and trying to do this. But there's also the military. There's also trade school, right? There's real estate. There's cosmetology. There's all these different other ways of being educated and putting yourself in a position that you can, after you get those licensing, certifications, degrees, now you can go and do something. And one of the things that people run into is that they go and get a degree, but the degree doesn't allow them to do something.
Mhm.
And that's why I say you have to start with the why. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to accomplish? And then what are the ways that's necessary for you to do that? So you want to be a doctor, you're definitely going to have to go to school. Right? You're going to have to go to school for that. You need, but for me to be a banker, I didn't necessarily have to go to school to be a banker because I was able to learn it in the role. Right? But I did have to commit myself to educating myself about the industry. And there's several different ways to do that. And so I think the one thing is starting with the why. The other part about it is I think sometimes we put education on a pedestal that we think about it outright, again, without really allowing it to be a firm part of the fabric of who we are. So we kind of want it for the street cred rather than what we can accomplish with the actual education. And I think that sometimes can throw the black man off or any person off, because when you start thinking about why did I even get it, and if people start having regret, and I would never want to spend that much money on a degree. The work that you have to do, even like for you just to become a doctor, I would never want to spend that time and then have to go back and say, man, I regret, because I probably felt like I could have did this another way. You shouldn't do that, because there's a reason why. But if you don't capture the reason, if you don't capture the purpose in it and what you feel like you can accomplish, whether it be individually, for your family, generationally, and then the legacy you leave in your community, like if you don't see that, then I would say you really need to really think. Make sure you get a handle on that before you take any steps forward, because that's what's going to be most important, is how is it going to put me in a position to be blessed, to be a blessing in this earth.
Wow, I love that. So how much of that education experience is not in the classroom or not in the actual things you're doing? I mean, I'm thinking about expectations, right? And I obviously have a lot of education if I'm halfway through my doctorate, but I'm thinking of all the lessons that I learned and then how much of that was in an actual classroom.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about that?
There's a reason why. I'll say this. I think there's a reason why colleges started having this. There's this necessity for practical application as you're getting your degree or you're getting your education, because that experience is important. I would say even coming from the ministry world, I remember I never went through full clip like Bible school or ministerial school, but I always remembered of those times that I made attempts and was trying to do it. After a while, I didn't do it because the experience was the bigger thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Once I started getting experience, especially once I started actually was an ordained elder, full-time pastor, that was important. But we actually were working on, before I resigned my position, we were working on an internship program that would allow students who were in Bible school or who wanted to go in ministry to get actual practical application in running and driving and operating in ministry, because that practical application was more important. Honestly, it seemed to make the biggest difference. So a lot of my lessons are life experience, hard knocks, right? The streets, learning from the streets, learning from my own mistakes, while at the same time, I have these guideposts around me, voices of wisdom, right? Reading, right? Again, learning for work, learning my product line, learning the changes that are happening in the industry, and then taking that knowledge of information and balancing that with life lived. and learned lessons from that. And so, yeah, I think life lived is a huge part of it. I will say, from a professional standpoint, I have interviewed kids who just came out of college, and I have interviewed them, and I have had several moments where, like, I didn't feel like the degree mattered.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've seen a person who didn't have that, but they just had a different mindset about them. They had a different drive about them. They had a different attitude, and they still had the knowledge and expertise they needed to do it. But the degree didn't entitle a person to anything.
Yes. Okay.
You know what I mean? It didn't. Now I'm saying all that to say, go get your education, go do it. I will be fully transparent and say, like, I don't have my college degree. It didn't happen for me as I was living out my journey. I was blessed to be able to get things done outside of that. But what I tell people is that because of the way I did it, my journey was longer. It was longer without an education, because I had, so it's like, you're going to spend 5 or 6 years getting experience to get a promotion, or you can go 5, 6 years in college, get the degree, and you can start off at a certain level. Like, it does allow you to do that. But it doesn't make you an automatic professional if you want to get in investing. Doesn't make you an automatic expert if you want to get into real estate. Doesn't make you an automatic expert if you want to even start your own business, right? You can have your small business degree and still not get it until you realize that this thing is a 24-hour job. Just because I had an idea doesn't mean I had a business. I had to actually go and learn how to run and drive business and how to be profitable in that through the lessons of life. And things like that. And so that's what I'll say to that.
I love that. And as I think of through, my education, I can remember when, I was a chaplain over at the rehab center, and then they came to me a year later and say, you need to go to chaplain school. Right. And so, but it made it a different school had I gone through it before, because I already had the experience of, okay, this is what happens when I go into a room with a Jewish family.
Yes.
As a Christian man, okay, so I've had interaction with Jews, but not when they're at their hardest moment, when somebody is sick and when somebody and the rituals and the thought process. So I'm glad I went to it, but I would have hated it had I had to go to it before. Yeah, they didn't have that experience that did it. And, some of our education, especially like you said, for business and finance and some of the things that create wealth or income, the internships and the experience before you go to school might be just as important as what you learn in the classroom, because there's nothing to tie on to when you're just getting book knowledge. And so, I guess what I would say would be, for folks that are thinking about it, if I'm going to college, and I told my kids this, I said 80% of whatever is going to, of what you learn in college needs to come from the relationships that you make. So create incredible relationships, because those are going to serve you throughout your life. Yeah. The book stuff is great, and you're gonna, like you said, if you're gonna be a doctor, you need to know how to, to give a shot or diagnose a disease or something like that. So you gotta understand anatomy, right? You gotta understand where a leg is compared to an arm. But at the same time, what those relationships and everything is so important. Let's pivot a little bit to the finances a little bit, because money is one of those things in our culture that we don't talk about enough. We hardly talk about it, and yet we spend most of our day, a third of our day sometimes, especially if we're in the workforce, right, trying to earn it so that it can give us options, trying to interact with it. Like I say, there's not a minute in a day that I'm not spending money, right? My electricity's on, and so I'm spending money whether it's right now or not, right? Yeah. So it's up there. I mean, I almost want to say it's up there with oxygen, because we need it to move forward. We need it to do stuff in our life. It's not the most important thing in our life, but it is important. And so how do we help ourselves understand this thing called money and get in places where money makes sense? Well, you're a banker, so give us what you can give us. All you can give us in 10 minutes on money, right?
Okay. Yeah. No, let's do it. So now, the one thing I will say, all right, now I'll start here. The truth of the matter is the biggest I would say one of the biggest counter effects to or impacts of racism and what happened to the black man is not really a race thing, but it's a money thing.
Absolutely.
What it did with us and our association and allegiance even to poverty and a poverty mindset is critical, because that is, I do think sometimes it's the outcome and the outflow of our racial situation. And I always say, when we want to have a real conversation, we're going to transition this conversation from race to money.
Mm-hmm.
Because what Dr. King did understand is that it was what he said. He said race, he said war, and he said poverty. Those things are like his big three. And which, when he left the earth, he was really trying to make a difference with the money. And when he started facing conflict is when he started messing with people's money. Right. But he realized that a lot can be changed if we can enhance the economic positioning of the black community. And if we can have economic enhancement and advancement, then a lot of this changes. The possibilities we see, the Bible says money answereth all things, right? Not to say that we have a love of money, but it's a resource, it's a tool we can use to get the things that we need and get ourselves in position for life. So I start with that foundation, that really the real issue of where we are and where we've been. A good part of that, and at the center, a part of the core of that, is a money problem. Right now, the thing about it is that we can have a money problem, but that doesn't mean we don't have money. It doesn't mean we don't have interaction with money. I tell people, most people are interacting with money before they're even literate, right, with money.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be literate to have financially literate in order to have a relationship with money. But in order to have a good relationship and have good success with money, you need, let's go back to it, you need education. You need to be financially literate, because you need to understand how much money impacts the world we live. It impacts the family you want to have. It impacts the wife you're looking for, the husband you're looking for. Like it plays this special role. I tell kids a lot of times, even when it comes to credit, you're probably interacting with credit before you even know what credit is, because you can get that right out once you get out of high school. You're 18 years old now. You can afford it. They'll just give you a credit card. I got a credit card before I even really knew what it was, and I totally misused that credit card.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I was 25, my credit was totally shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean. So like I have bad credit before I even know what credit is. I don't even know how the system works. I don't even know how it is. And so being financially literate is important, because again, once we get our dignity together, once we start rounding ourselves around our identity, once we start talking about, hey, I got an education, I have skill and expertise, this is putting me in a position where I can do more with my life. That more is 9 times out of 10 is going to come with an increase in finances. Right. And we ask this question all the time, like, what would you do if you got $1 million? Right. But then look at how many people who win the lottery, they get $1 million, but they don't have $1 million mindset. They don't have tools and strategies of what to do with money when it gets in their hands, which is why I'm so glad that we started with conversations about identity and who I am. Because whenever I teach a financial education class, the first thing is going to be is money and me. Who am I when money hits my hand? What's possible for money when it gets into my hand, because it's all about who I am, and we're all trying to do the same thing, but different mindsets do it different ways. So I want everybody to have $1,000 or $2,000 of emergency savings, right? But the mindsets make us go about that differently. Our personalities make us go about that differently, because you have a person that I say save $2,000, that person is like, bet, let's do it. I'm with it. I'm gonna make that happen, because they're frugal already anyway. They don't like to spend a lot of money, and they don't want to. So they don't mind doing it. It's easy for them. But then you have a person who's like, man, you mean I'm just gonna have $2,000 and it's gonna sit in the account? And I ain't gonna do nothing. Like they can't. There's a person who can't stand to see money just sitting in their account because they feel like they're missing out on something. So we have to deal with our own personalities and our own mindsets when it comes to money, so that we can all get to that same place. $2,000 in expenses, 3 to 6 months of savings, right? Then working on your debt snowballing, canceling out your debt, then thinking about your long-term retirement 10, 15, 20 years from now, and what do you want to do, right? All of that begins with where you are, who you are, and what's possible right now. But the truth of the matter is, when we talk about generational legacy, a part of the generational legacy should include generational inheritance, right? A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, right? So it should start with that, and that very statement has monetary value. So we have to start shifting and even reimagining our relationship with money as we're reimagining our own dignity, our own identity, our own value, and our own worth, right? That means in this world, in this system that we're in, that means it's going to involve some level of monetary value. And it's getting to a point to where it's not where money has you, but where you have and own the money, and you tell it what to do, and not having your money tell you what you're going to do, right? So there's a lot within that. There's a lot of different layers to that we have to dig in and uncover. But where I would start with is just really thinking about who we are. Again, money and me. Is it me or is it the money? What happens when money hits my hand, and what are those different changes that I need to make? Setting goals with your finances, which is simply budgeting, but setting goals with your finances is important, and giving yourself a target. So after we talk about money and me, my very next class is going to be money with a mission. And we're going to talk about having a purpose for your money and having a goal, something that you're trying to shoot for. And that way you get to own the process. You get to control the process. You can be flexible. If life happens, you can adjust certain types of goals, but you want to make sure that you have a purpose for your money and have a mission for it. And then this last thing I'll say is that break the limitations off of your mindset when it comes to your money. Because the thing I always hear is that I don't make enough money to do that. That's the thing I always, what do I do? I'm not making enough. I don't have enough. I can't do this. I don't have that. Well, we got to start somewhere. And the truth of the matter is the Warren Buffetts of the world, they are where they are is because they understand this about money, is that it accumulates over time. Yeah. So if you take the limitations off, change your mindset about it, and have an accumulation of money, of assets over time type of mindset, yes, maybe you're in this place today. But when we think 20 years down the line, do you understand how much you can do if you save $1 every day, right, for the next 20 years and let it accumulate? Put it in an account that's actually earning good interest, right? Like, talk to somebody before you put it in that account so we can make sure you're in the right account. But like, when you think about accumulation over time, that's how you have generational impact, because nobody started with it, right? Unless you're the person who's receiving the inheritance. But if we're the ones who are having to start, like, we're having to, in many cases, we're having to create generational impact now. So if you are the creator of generational impact, then you're talking about maybe a 20-year, at minimum, sometimes a 20-year journey to freedom that you have to be on. And you have to think about not just necessarily what I can do for myself, but you have to think, I want to make things more possible for my kids and my children's children, right? And so that has to be okay with you, which is a whole other thing in and of itself, is that I think real purpose is not centered around what you want to do for yourself. Real purpose is what God gave Abraham when he said, I will bless you to be a blessing until all nations of the earth be blessed. And so I know I'm really blessed when I'm being a blessing to others. So my plan for financial freedom, my plan for generational wealth is not just centered around me. It's about my grandkids. And I'm okay to make sacrifices in my present so that they can have possibilities in their future.
Ooh, I love it. Hey, we're going to have to do a class together where we center around, because, when you think like Warren Buffett, 80% of his wealth was created after he was 60 years old, and you think of because of the thing that you said is time. But I also think when I think of the dynamics of the Black family. And I think of who holds the money in the family, who runs the money in the family, who's allowed to have some of the money in the family. We start really thinking about that relationship that you said around money. And it's for a lot of Black men, it's, mama took care of it. Wife wants to take care of it. I'm going to give you a little bit. Just don't go waste it everywhere. But then we don't have this really tight relationship of how money can work for us and how we should utilize it, because we've allowed somebody else to take care of it. We've allowed somebody else to tell us what needs to happen with our paychecks and what comes in. What do you say to that? And how do we kind of move that so it's more of a whole family decision and not, here you go?
No, I think that's such a great thing, because I totally saw that. I literally, and I sometimes, I don't know if it was right or wrong, but my mama totally ran the finances in our house. My wife right now, and we do it differently, but I could see my dad giving the check to my mom. Right. And he keep on driving, and she just takes it happily and puts it in her purse. Right. Because she's like, that's mine. Right. That's my money. But I remember that. But I think that one of the interesting things about that is when you're giving it to a person who has a survival mindset as much as a growth mindset. And when I found this, it is why the mindset is so important, is because what we're used to doing is getting money to survive. We haven't, right? I just need to get by. I need to get through to the next paycheck or get to my next moment. Sometimes we even live like even we don't, from a growth standpoint, so we're always waiting for the big check to come in. Which is why real conversations around what we do when it's income tax season, right? We see the memes come out, all the viral videos come out, because we know our history when it comes to income tax season, because that's a windfall that we get. And for some of us, it's the only windfall that many times we see in our life, because we don't have an expectation for a windfall of an inheritance, a windfall of insurance, like if a family member passes away. We don't have that, because a lot of times we're just thinking survival, right? But when we think growth, I'm not waiting for the windfall. I'm putting myself in a position where I can grow to a place where I increase my possibilities over time. And so whoever's handling the money, and even like you said, involving our kids in that, because that was a whole other thing. You didn't know what your mom and them made. They didn't talk about it. I knew we had food on the table. I knew we had clothes, right? But I didn't know what they made, right? And so being a part, having that conversation as a family and making those decisions, right? So that even though my wife, she may be the person who pays bills and handles the finances, but it's a conversation though that we had. So we both agreed on what we were going to do with the money, right? And I've even found, even in this position where I'm in, so I was, a part of my history, even with Key Bank, is that I came to Key Bank starting over. Right. So I was starting from scratch, and we found ourselves building from 2017 up until now, where it's gotten a little bit better every year. Right. We were a little bit more capable every year. But it's funny. It wasn't until I got into this new position that I'm in now as a district manager that I realized how much, even in those years and even before that I had such a survival mindset with my money. I was really just surviving. I didn't need to grow, right? We'll keep pushing our bills. We'll pay that later. I just need to survive. And then I realized I'm in a different position financially, and I'm still just surviving. So the conversation me and my wife have had is we want to shift from that, because we're more capable now. You gotta be able to tell yourself, you can do more now. You're not broke anymore, right? You're not struggling anymore. Sometimes we have to tell ourselves that as Black people. You're not struggling anymore. You're living way better than what our ancestors lived, right? We're still better, and we have to continue to see ourselves get better. But we have to switch it from just having a survivor's mentality where we're just trying to hold on and make it through the day to a growth mentality where we're saying, now, how can I put this back to get so I can put myself in a position to go from point A to point B and start doing little things to move the needle that can accumulate to great possibilities over time.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And even just thinking through that, even tax strategies, you mentioned, waiting for the windfall that we get. If you think about dollar cost averaging and say it's $12,000 you get every year, and you put $1,000 every single month instead of waiting to get $12,000 and then paying back stuff, or take half of that and do that, right? Put 6,000 every, 600 every month or whatever it is. You think of how that accumulates over time, but that survival mechanism says, I'm surviving, get a whole bunch of money, spend it all on the things that I've been wanting to spend it on, and then survive.
Yeah.
Right? And then changing that whole mindset around how to do it. So a great conversation. Hey, we are literally at an hour, which it just went so fast. But what I want you to do is anything that we didn't talk about or anything that you definitely want, we're going to do this again. We're gonna increase this conversation. I'm telling you guys right now that Stephen and I are going to put together an online course on 101 Money for Black Men, and we're going to talk about all these issues, and it's going to expand, and it's going to be fun. So we're going to do that. I'm just letting him know now because he doesn't know that yet. We're going to do that. So don't worry that you didn't get all the information you wanted to get right now, because you're going to get it, because we know how important this is. But can you just talk about anything, something that you didn't get to talk about that you want to share that this audience is going to get, that maybe it's just a taste so that we can follow up on this when we do our next session together, because I am not leaving this with us just talking about identity and money, but we want to make sure that we get there.
Yeah, no, I really don't have anything. The only thing I would say is despise not the day of small beginnings. That wherever you are, you may have to start small, and that's okay. If you can just take ownership and appreciate the process and what your journey looks like, not compared to anybody else, just appreciate your journey. Be okay to start small and just start taking baby steps one day at a time. And I promise you, you'll see yourself better next year than you are right now.
Wow, that's so good. And we didn't even get into associations and telling folks that you don't have to do this all alone. The journey that you're on to freedom right now is not meant to be by yourself. God didn't create us to be lone folks in this world trying to figure out by ourselves. He created us to be in community, and we want to create that community and put that community together. And this may be the first step. The journey to freedom universe that we're in is going to give you lots of options and places that you will be able to tap into, and that we hope you do. But we want to help you develop community if you don't have a community, a community that moves you forward, not community that moves you backwards or keeps you stuck or keeps you stable. So, Stephen, I appreciate you being on today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day, which I know it really is, to be on here. And oh gosh, I got 3 pages of notes right here of just things that we need to unpack and we need to talk about. And so, like I said, this isn't going to be the last time. I just want you and everybody else to know that how much we appreciate you and your impact that you're making in the communities that you're making. Keep doing it. Keep doing the things that you're doing. Keep being the example that we need. And then we will talk to you on the next time.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right.
Thank you.